Oh, hi, 'tis Lisbeth Miles, and you're listening to the Sirens audio.
G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the podcast devoted to Doctor Who and the audio medium. Today is a very special episode because it's episode 42. I'm your host, my name's Dwayne, and...
It's Philip. Hey guys, how you going?
Philip, 42, we couldn't resist. We had to do it. Not only is Douglas Adams a very successful and world-renowned science fiction comedy writer, as far as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy goes, but we've also got our own claim on him as Doctor Who fans. So
we do indeed.
Yeah. So what better way to celebrate a bit of Douglas Adams than to talk about him in episode 42? We're gonna go in depth a little bit more about Doctor Who and the Krikkitmen, which was released a few years ago now, but we're going to talk about our thoughts on the audiobook version read by Dan Starkey. I haven't come prepared with something to dive down the rabbit hole with, so let's just get straight into talking about Douglas Adams. What are your earliest memories of Douglas Adams? Was it the Doctor Who or was it Hitchhikers?
My earliest memories was actually Hitchhikers. So down here in Australia on our ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Station, every Sunday afternoon they were playing Hitchhikers, an episode a week. And I must have been 9 or 10 when they were on. And I remember vividly sitting down with my father once a week. It was about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd sit down, we'd listen to an episode. And my parents are English. They were 5-pound poms when they came to Australia. So they've still got very English sense of humour. And Hitchhikers just appealed to my father. And he used to belly laugh all the way through it. And even now I still remember... it being a very important part and a big part of my life. So the radio show would have been when I first listened to it. I do remember the book coming out. I remember being on a train and reading the line. There's a line that talks about the Vogon spaceships hung in space in exactly the same way that bricks don't. And I remember just bursting out in laughter on the train and all these people turning and looking at me as I'm laughing my way through this book. So yeah, that's how I first discovered Douglas. What about you? What's your first memories?
Well, my first memories are somewhat different because my family was not like yours. We didn't sit around the radio or listen to radio shows. It's more of an English tradition, isn't it? So I guess that's where your family got that from. But my earliest recollections are of going to the library, and at the same time that I was borrowing copies of Genesis of the Daleks on cassette from the library and taking that home to listen to, I was also borrowing the cassette version, which was the LP version, so slightly it was re-recorded for LP, the LP version of The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. So I hadn't even heard the first 4 episodes. I'd listened to the final 2 in the Hitchhiker series, and I played that over and over again. I know it off by heart pretty much, those particular 2 episodes, and I didn't hear the radio series until many, many years later after the TV series, because it was after I'd heard Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Then I started watching Hitchhikers when it came out on TV. What was that, about in the mid-'80s? It was probably a repeat by then, because Hitchhikers, the TV series, was much earlier than that. And I was just hooked on the humour and absolutely loved it. Devoured all the books up to that point. When I started reading the books, there was only the 4. Only up to So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. So I don't think I've read past that. I don't think I've read Mostly Harmless, and I think there's one more after that, isn't there? But
Yeah, the one after that's not by Douglas Adams, it's by Ian Cofer.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my earliest memories of Hitchhikers, and it's kind of fitting that we're talking about him on the Sirens of Audio because he made his mark on audio. It's kind of unusual in a way. There's not many other shows that I can think of. In fact, I don't think there's any that I can think of that started off as a radio show. You might have had him as a book, or you may have had him as a movie, gone on to TV, or vice versa. But starting off as a radio show and then developing onto TV, it was huge. And as far as
TV, books, movies, it was and plays. So
yeah,
it's actually covered. Yeah, it's interesting because he would be the most famous writer Doctor Who's ever had. Not meaning to take away from Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies, who are both stunning writers and quite famous now.
Yeah.
For other things as well. But in terms of worldwide fame, Douglas Adams is by far the most famous writer Doctor Who's ever had. And yet, his actual output wasn't much. He wasn't a prolific writer in any sense at all. He a handful of books, a handful of stories, and often he regurgitated these stories totally, as we'll discuss no doubt. Yeah, it's fascinating how he produced so little and yet he's so famous.
Yeah, he milked it for all it was worth, didn't he? So if we go back to The Hitchhiker's Guide, there were some different castings as well between the radio series and the TV series. And Geoffrey McGivern as Ford Prefect is probably my favourite Ford Prefect, because we had David Dixon in the TV series, but I just don't think he was the same. And the thing I like about the audios is the characterizations I enjoy a lot more on audio than I do on television. You got David Dixon, you've got Sandra Dickinson playing Trillian, totally different characters on TV as opposed to the characters in radio. We had Sandra Dickinson putting on just using her American accent throughout the TV series, which I didn't really like after hearing the radio versions for so long before seeing it on TV. It was a bit jarring. What are your thoughts on the different castings? Because we had Simon Jones, who has been Arthur Dent all the way through up until Martin Freeman in the movie, and then who else? Mark Wing Davey. He's been consistent throughout.
Zevon Beetlebrox.
Yeah. But the others have all changed. What are your thoughts on those?
I'm not sure that I actually realised quite so much that they had changed, I must admit. I mean, Sandra Dickinson was the one that stood out the most, just because her voice is so unusual. I actually met Sandra Dickinson and Peter Davison because they were married for a time. Mm. And when Peter Davison came out to Australia, he came to an event with his wife. And when Sandra actually first spoke, answered a question, the audience actually laughed, because people had always thought that Trillian was putting on a voice. They actually thought that wasn't her real voice. That was a voice she was putting on for the character. Mm. And that actually is her real voice. So I think everyone was a bit surprised and laughed because they were sort of surprised. So I actually think, Trillian, I think, loses some of her gravitas and some of her agency by using Sandra Dickinson. I just think the voice and her manner isn't as strong. I think in the radio series, she's a much stronger character. She's in control of the situation much more. Yeah, I think it loses a bit when it goes to the TV show, which is sad because it's typical of the time. There's very few female characters around, and so the fact that actually the one character actually was a strong character with agency in the radio play, it was a bit sad it lost it when it went to the TV show. Yeah, absolutely right. She was lovely to look at on screen, but that voice just didn't carry the same weight as the actresses did in the radio series. Yeah, and I guess throughout time they've had troubles in terms of radio actors and even silent movie stars moving to voice things, because someone's voice actors can look like anything, and I mean often big Finnish actors talk about the fact that they would never be cast in this role on television because they just don't look right. But when you're a vocal artist, you can be anyone, anytime, almost any age, the more talented you are, the more you can do. But a lot of the looks and things don't carry across to television, which is, I assume, why a lot of them didn't carry across to the BBC show when they made it.
Yeah. So in 1978, the same time as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was first being broadcast and was, well, very quickly shot Douglas Adams to huge fame and acclaim. He'd started with Doctor Who. He'd been trying to get into Doctor Who for quite a while. It was Anthony Reid who picked up on an idea that Douglas Adams put to the BBC for a Doctor Who story called Doctor Who and the Krikkitmen. Now, Anthony Reid thought this was too ambitious, interesting story, but he said, try another one. And that's where the Pirate Planet came from. So we had the Pirate Planet second story in the Key to Time season in 1978. And this was Douglas Adams' first script in Doctor Who. And it wasn't too long after that he'd become the script editor for series 17. So I threw out a tweet a little bit earlier, just asking for some feedback from anybody who saw that tweet on their thoughts on Douglas Adams and his work with Doctor Who. So I'll read a couple of those out and we might talk about those, Philip. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great.
So this is a tweet that I got from Rob Irwin from the Doctor Who show. He says, as a very serious young Doctor Who fan in the 80s, I was aghast at Adams' work in the show. I loved his extracurricular work with a passion, but when he was putting silliness into Doctor Who, and Tom Baker was also as at peak silly, I just roll my eyes. Nowadays I love it much more than when I was a kid, and I feel privileged that one of the great comedic sci-fi writers was, damn it, the script editor of our little show. It's a badge of honour. Funny how attitudes can change like this in one's lifetime. Thanks for that, Rob. What are your thoughts on that, Philip?
I'm not sure I was a serious young fan or not. Certainly, when it came to the Key to Time series, The Pirate Planet was probably one of my least favourites because it was silly. I prefer the Rivers Operation. Stones of Blood is my favourite one in the whole season because it's also gothic and so maybe I was a serious young Doctor Who fan who loved the fear, the gothic, and all of that. And at the time, the Pirate Planet just seemed a bit silly. But I go back now and watch it now, and it is a work of genius. It was so ambitious in terms of scope. It is truly horrible in terms of the death scale and the murder that's been going on. And Tom Baker's performance, he can be silly, but he's also so passionate and terrifying when he realises what's going on. And he does that anger rant in either episode 3 or episode 4. So, in fact, it's now turned out to be probably one of my favourite in the whole season. So, from being one of my least favourites, it's now one of my favourites. And the more I hear it, the more the dialogue, the gravitation, that tunnel that they're in, super, super ambitious. What they managed to achieve in that show is astounding. And it still holds up today as a great tale.
Tim Archer also tweeted to us, and he was responding to Rob Irwin's tweet. He said it was all about the tone and the aesthetic. Now, was that potentially one of the issues with that particular era, that it looked cheap for its time? Star Wars was out, so everyone was expecting all the whizzes and bangs in science fiction. But Doctor Who was never like that, because I'm a bit like Rob, who I was a very, very serious fan, and I wasn't getting stories like, season 14, season 13, Seeds of Doom, that kind of thing, Terror of the Zygons, very serious, very scary. But that's the thing with Douglas Adams. All of his stories, including Pirate Planet, and all of the stories that he script edited too, if you put thought into them, they are quite scary concepts. Look at what Scarleone's trying to do to travel back in time. He just doesn't care about the whole population of the planet. There goes the whole world. Yeah, Nightmare of Eden's I love that story. Tackling a very serious issue of drug smuggling and drug addiction. I think Nightmare of Eden suffers a little bit there because you've got design issues with with the monsters. which was the Graham Williams era is famous for that. But throughout every single script that Douglas Adams worked on, it has an intelligence that I don't think your serious young teenage Doctor Who fan could cope with. So it all came across as silly. And I recently watched Series 17 in its entirety. Well, apart from City of Death, because I've seen it so many times, I decided to skip that one. And it's not as silly as I remember. It's a lot more serious than I remember. Yes, Tom Baker is cracking jokes, but he's not doing it in a way that's... It's not slapstick.
I say, what a wonderful butler. He's so violent. Hello. I'm called the Doctor. That's Romana. That's Duggan. You must be the Countess Scaglione. And this is clearly a delightful Louis Cairns chair. May I sit in it? I say, haven't they worn well? Thank you, Herman. That'll be all.
Doctor, you're being very pleasant with me.
Well, I'm a very pleasant fellow.
But I didn't invite you here for social reasons.
Yes, I could see that the moment you didn't ask me to have it. Well, I will have a drink now you come to mention it. Yes, do come in, everybody. Romana, sit down over there. Duggan. Now, Duggan, you sit there. Do sit down if you want to count. Oh, all right.
My dear, I don't think he's as stupid as he seems.
My dear, nobody could be as stupid as he seems.
It has an intelligence that that potentially some of the earlier seasons of Tom Baker didn't have. So I don't know if you feel that way. I think a lot of us, as we're getting older, we're appreciating more and more these seasons that we kind of wrote off a little bit in our youth.
I see it with my kids in the teenage years go off things like Disney. You know, Disney films are for little kids, and yet as they're getting older again now on the other side, they're going back and loving it all again. Mm. So there's a period of time where kids sort of pretend to be grown-ups, and so because we're going to be grown up, that's just silly. We're not going to laugh at that anymore. And I think Doctor Who fans did it with the Graham Williams era. I think a lot of us, who are around for it, good on you guys who weren't born yet. But for those of us, a lot of us who were around for it, we wanted it to be gritty. We wanted it to be serious, and it seemed silly. It seemed childish. Now, as we become more grown up and we look back, we actually see no, it's not. There's so much depth. There's so many big ideas. So many, the gravitas is there. It's just that we cut it out because we wanted to be grown-ups. And in the process, actually lost what actually was preciously important.
Mm. And John Dathan Turner, the next year, decided to change that. He tried to tone down the humour. He tried to make Tom Baker darker. He tried to make it more glossy. But when you compare season 17 and season 18 now, I always go season 17. Always.
18 looks amazing. It looks beautiful. It was what the fans wanted.
Yep.
But 17 is more fun. And if you actually want to just enjoy yourself, 17, because the Doctor's enjoying himself. Romana's enjoying this. They're enjoying each other's company. Romana is more doctor than the Doctor is for lots of it, and she takes the roles. They actually hand her huge swathes of actually the main plot, and then that all changes again when you get to the next season.
Yeah. Another tweet that we got in response to my tweet was from Ian Branch. He says, even though he had close ties with Doctor Who, that's Douglas Adams, it was an audio book of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy read by Stephen Moore that drew me into his genius. He is sadly missed. His humour was second to none. So, yeah, what about audiobooks? Did you find yourself listening to audiobooks, or did you just read them? Because there are different versions out there. The Stephen Moore ones are still around. There's audiobook versions read by Douglas Adams himself, which is very interesting to compare him reading his material with something like Doctor Who and the Krikkitmen with Dan Starkey. Very interesting to compare those two. Did you get into those audiobooks at all?
I have listened to the first one by Stephen Moore, but I remember owning the radio series on cassette tape. It was on about 12 or 15 cassette tapes. And so for me, it was always putting in the radio series again. So I've listened to the radio series dozens of times. And most recently, 12 months ago with my kids in the car, I put it on again. So I did listen to the first book read. I've read all the books and I enjoy reading the books. But in terms of audio, the only one I listened to was the Stephen Moore version. But I will more likely put in the whole radio play because the music is amazing. The sound effects are amazing. It actually took radio drama to a whole new level, I think. They'd been much more simple. There'd been simpler plots and lots of crime stuff and those sort of things. But this was the first big attempt at something big, sci-fi, big sweeping. And the BBC Radiophonics Workshop got heavily involved with doing all the sound effects. And they knew what they were doing because of Doctor Who. So I think that's why the sound quality is very different. And even when they went to the TV show, it's amazing. Most of the sound effects they carried with them. The sounds of the book, the music, they actually carried it across because it had worked so well originally.
Tell us about Series 2. How does that relate to the Hitchhiker universe? Why was that radio series... That was never novelised, was it?
The second series?
Second radio series, yeah.
That's a good question. I've got the feeling that bits of it were spread out across different books. As I said, the thing about Douglas Adams is he plagiarises himself left, right, and centre. Yes. As I said, I listened to all. I think is it 6 seasons now of the radio plays, and I listened through the whole thing about 12 months ago, and they all sort of kind of start to merge together.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about Shada, because this is one, if Douglas Adams plagiarises himself, well then the BBC has dug into the Shada wardrobe more times than you can poke a stick at. I think the first time Shada was released on VHS was sometime in the 90s. Tom Baker was doing narration between all the missing bits. That was actually really entertaining. He was doing it in the first person, wasn't he?
He was.
So I think that is available on the Legacy box set on DVD. Is that right? I think it was released on DVD. But the most interesting and exciting version was when BBCI were doing animations and audio versions of Doctor Who in the early 2000s. They did a version with Big Finish featuring the 8th Doctor and Romana. And I thought that was a really fascinating way that they were able to include the 8th Doctor in that, because they wrote that in quite well to the story. You know, how could you have the 8th Doctor doing the Shada script? Well, it's kind of all relates to that little glitch that happened in the 5 Doctors, so it's explained quite well.
Beware the sphere. Beware Skagra. Beware Shada.
Come on, Romana, come on, K9. We've got to go back. Back to Cambridge, 1979.
Ah, Doctor, how splendid to see you.
You too, Professor. This is Romana.
Ship.
Welcome home, my lord.
My ship, tell me of the one called The Doctor.
You brought a book from Gallifrey to Cambridge.
Yes, just a few knickknacks, you know, and you know how I love my books, Doctor.
It's the book itself. It's atomically unstable. It seems to be absorbing radioactivity.
A book's doing that?
Yes. I think it's very, very dangerous. We must find the Professor.
Do you know him?
Hardly at all. He just lent me a book.
A book? We've been looking for a book.
It is a very dangerous book, and I have been very careless with it. It is the key to Shada.
It would help if we knew who Shada was.
Who or what?
How naive, Doctor. How pathetically limited your vision.
Limited?
Take over the universe. Oh, how childish.
Welcome back to your ship, my lord.
What is that?
Estimated arrival of life form in this command area in 21 seconds and counting.
What? K9, why on earth didn't you try and tell me sooner? Doctor, look out!
For a dead man, Doctor, you are extremely ingenious. Genius.
And all the characters are played by different actors. Some really big names in the Big Finish version were Andrew Sachs as Skagra, which I'm always happy that Andrew Sachs is in the Doctor Who universe, although he was in a Big Finish story called The Boy Who Time Forgot. That's what it was called, wasn't it? That was Andrew Sachs as well. So we've had Manuel in Big Finish audio a couple of times.
Yes, I was going to say he's Manuel in 40 Towers is the role most people know him from.
Yes. Did I not say that?
You didn't mention 40 Towers.
I just said Manuel.
You just said Manuel.
Everyone knows Manuel, don't they?
Everyone knows Manuel. You are a waste of space.
A hideous orangutan. And who was the other big actor who was playing Chronotis in that? Was it James Fox? No, Edward Fox.
It was, yeah. No, James Fox. James Fox.
It was James Fox?
James Fox.
There's a couple of different Foxes. I get mixed up.
Yeah. And Sean Bigglestaff, who is still famous for Harry Potter, was playing Chris Parsons. Barnaby Edwards, Nicholas Pegg, so there's some typical stalwarts there. But Susanna Harker was playing Claire Knightley. And Susanna Harker, I knew, once again, a very famous actress who I knew from the English version of House of Cards.
Right.
Which, if you ever get to see the English trilogy of the House of Cards, it is spectacular.
Yeah. And Susanna would go on to play Sapphire in Big Finish's Sapphire and Steel. So she was awesome as Sapphire. Absolutely.
And Hannah Gordon's in it as well. As well as John Leeson. So I think they wanted to get Tom Baker back, but he said no.
Mm-hmm.
And so they found a way of doing it with Paul McCann. It surprised me. This is actually the first ever completed Shada. So it's going to be done so many times more after this. But BBCI with Big Finish, this is the first time they actually managed to put it together. And of course, you can still buy the CD from Big Finish.
Oh yes, yes you can.
Right.
I don't think it's available on download though. I don't think it's licensed for download. Yeah,
it's not licensed for download. So it's one of the ones. Actually, it's one of my favorites. It's a good favorite of mine. I must listen to it. I haven't listened to it for a long time. The Downtime and the Shada that Big Finish did for BBCI were just both magnificent. And Shada, it's a lot of fun.
It was real time, wasn't it?
Real time, yeah. Both of them are just amazing versions.
Yeah. It was so exciting to have that new Doctor Who coming out. Because it was coming out weekly. They were releasing episodes, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the animations weren't great, but then the internet wasn't great.
The internet wouldn't have coped with it. We were just using dial-up at the time.
That's right. And so it was dial-up, and so it was, one animation per 5 or 10 seconds and very slight changes in the animations just to keep up because there just wasn't much you could do. But once again, it's fitting that the BBC was doing it because Douglas Adams was such a huge fan of technology. He was the first person to buy a Mac in all of Europe, and his funeral was the first funeral to ever be broadcast on the internet. After he died. So he loved technology. He loved all things technology. He was ahead of the game, and so he was always playing around with what technology could do. And so the fact that this was one of the first attempts at cartoons on the internet, I think Douglas Adams would have been very pleased with.
Interestingly, Douglas Adams was very closely associated with John Lloyd, who was a producer. And a writer. I think they lived together. We recently discovered, and in March, Big Finish is about to release John Lloyd's script adapted by Nev Fountain of the Doomsday Contract, a script that John Lloyd wrote for Doctor Who back then for that particular year. And if you look at, I know you don't like looking at blurbs, but you'll see some very interesting similarities to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the blurb. So I'm going to be very interested to see how it all pans out because it's going to be a fascinating story. But that's released next month, the Doomsday Contract. But anyway, let's. Sorry.
March. Is it next month? When are we? Yes. No.
Oh, yes, it is March. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, March. I don't know where I am at the moment. Yeah, going to be released in March. So let's jump on now to Doctor Who and the Krikkitmen, which was the main product that we wanted to talk about, the audiobook version of Doctor Who and the Krikkitmen that we both had a listen to recently, read by the amazing Dan Starkey. So do you want to just give us an overview of the story to start with, Philip? I'm going to give that job to
you. So the Doctor and Romana go to a cricket game at Lloyd's in London, and Romana's disgusted by the fact of what humans are doing with this game, and we understand there's a link behind it. And suddenly these Krikkitmen, which are robots, come and invade the Lloyd's pitch, and they steal one of the bales. And we work out the fact that in the past there's been a race of people who thought they were alone in the universe because of a dust cloud. Suddenly someone saw, though, that there was a whole universe of people, and these people, the Krikkitmen, decided that the entire universe needed to be destroyed. But the Time Lords intervened, locked them up in a time eddy, so they couldn't get out. But there's still some of their robots out in the universe who are trying to find a way to free them. So it's a bit like a Keys and Mariner story. Each of the robots are going around to different planets trying to assemble the key, which is a wicket. So it's 3 long poles, 2 short poles.
In their spaceship, the pavilion.
In their spaceship, which is a pavilion. It's bizarre as. And the Doctor and Romana are trying to get to planets ahead of them to try and get bits of the key before the Krikkitmen get there to destroy them. So it's on Gallifrey. It's set on about 6 or 7 different planets. It is huge in scope. It is just massive. Some of the planets and the populations are hilarious. Some of them get wiped out and you don't care about them because they're such bizarre people. But it's a huge script. Basically, it's a bit like Keys and Marinus. It's the Doctor and robots trying to get the stumps together to stop these people being released, because if they get released again, once again, this hate of all people will be unleashed on the galaxy.
Yeah.
Does that sum it up enough? It's a huge story.
It is a massive story. However, you may find it very similar to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Tertiary Phase, if you've heard that on audio, or Life, the Universe, and Everything. So, like we've said already, Douglas Adams likes to plagiarise himself, and when the Krikkitmen story was knocked back a couple of times, because not only was it knocked back before he wrote Pirate Planet, but he also pitched it again as a movie later on with Tom Baker, he went and reused the ideas in it for Life, the Universe, and Everything. So, yes, a lot of the elements in there that I'd heard before, they were kind of familiar to me because I've obviously read the book and heard the tertiary phase. So that kind of brings us to the audio book read by Dan Starkey. And I think he's a fantastic choice to read this book, because the one thing that sort of proves to me that this is not Douglas Adams solely, but James Goss as well. James Goss has got his stamp on it, but it is a huge, sprawling novel, and I don't think Douglas Adams would have ever released a novel that was this big. It's particularly in the Hitchhiker series. They weren't. He may have split it into 2 or 3 books. That's how big this book is. So, the other interesting thing, Dan Starkey. You compare his reading to Douglas Adams, and he's like, Douglas Adams is on 33.5, Dan Starkey's on 75 speed. He's a very, very, very fast reader, but he does the voices. He does Romana. He does Tom Baker's voice. He does lots of. He puts voices into every character that's quoted there. So, and it's a massive effort. The book runs for about over 9 hours. So, and we've both sat through that in the last couple of weeks, Philip. So I think we've done a great job in getting through that.
Can I make a confession about the 9 hours?
Yeah. Oh, you put it on. You put it on.
I put it on 1.5 speed.
I don't know how you could do that with Dan Starkey reading so fast normally.
It was fine, but yes. But I listened to it in 6 hours, so I kind of cheated a bit.
Well, that's okay. You can do that too.
First, there came the Doctor. He stormed onto the pitch like Moses coming down the mountain in a high temper, because God said he hadn't got any commandments to hand out right now, but how about lunch next week? The Doctor marched up to the English captain.
Excuse me, are you in charge of the cricket?
The cluster of players on the pitch stared at the Doctor. A small podium had been dragged out for the purposes of the presentation. The chairman had come out, freshly polished medals on his loveliest blazer. The umpire, in his best butcher's coat, stood to one side. The two teams were getting ready to shake hands and find a pub. But the Doctor had bounded onto the podium and was addressing them.
"People of Earth, good afternoon," he began. "Shame!" shouted someone.
The chairman was looking around for security, and then remembered that this was a cricket match. They didn't need security.
"Honestly, this will take barely a second. I'm doing this for the good of the galaxy, possibly the whole universe, and maybe the very fabric of space-time itself," the Doctor persisted. "You're a disgrace!" someone shouted. "How can I be?" the Doctor smiled. "I'm wearing a tie. So, would one of you care to tell me what's going on here exactly?"
Confronted by the full force of his personality, the captain of the Australian team blanched.
"Well, mate,"
he began, and then stopped. This really wasn't done.
"Go on,"
the Doctor prompted him. The Australian captain held up the small silver trophy he held.
"The other side won, so I'm presenting them with the trophy."
"Fascinating," the Doctor grimaced. "And what is that trophy?"
There was a stunned pause on the pitch.
"Well,"
the Australian captain began again,
"these are the ashes."
"Quite right,"
someone in the crowd mumbled.
"Yes, but," the Doctor continued, "what are they, exactly?"
"Well, ashes," the captain said.
"Of what?"
The Doctor's amiable nature had lowered just a little.
"Well,"
the captain began.
"Do you start every sentence like that?"
the Doctor asked.
"Well..."
"Never mind."
The Doctor looked at the teams gathered around him.
"Can any of you tell me what those ashes are made of?"
"A burnt stump."
"A budgie." "The soul of cricket."
The Doctor looked at them and nodded again.
"Not good," he said. "I don't suppose any of you have ever had a peek inside, have you?"
The group glared at him.
"Oh, come on. Not late at night when no one's looking?"
The glaring got a little darker.
"The lid's welded shut,"
someone muttered.
"Then you mean to say," the Doctor pressed on, "that you spend your lives passing this trophy back and forth, and none of you have any idea what's inside it?"
The group suddenly looked at the grass. "It's just not done," hissed the umpire firmly.
"Well then," said the Doctor pleasantly, "I've a suggestion. As you don't know what's inside that trophy, and I would very much like to know, I was wondering if I could possibly borrow them from you. Just for a bit."
He flashed his most winning smile.
"For an X-ray?"
someone stuttered weakly.
"If you like," the Doctor shrugged. "The thing is, your ashes are terribly important."
He had finally said something the group liked.
"Quite right. They represent all that is good about cricket."
The Doctor winced.
"More than that," he said slowly. "They are rather important for the future of the universe."
Good. Yeah, I do think that Dan Starkey is an amazing reader. There were times I forgot it was just one person reading, because he would be doing all these characters back and forth, and I was actually taken out of the fact that it was just a single reader as people were having conversations. He does a Brian Blessed impersonation at one point with one of the characters, a King Shah, is it? Shan. And that voice is just hilarious in terms of what he's doing. I'm trying to think what his name is. Oh, Khan. So yeah, so there's a Khan character, and as I said, I thought I was listening to Brian Blessed, this shouty voice. Tom Baker's amazing. It's just very, very amusing all the way through. I think the one thing that struck me too is on Gallifrey, all the Doctor and Romana just keep talking about all the sofas. Because it's one of the standing jokes in Arc of Infinity. There's just sofas everywhere. Like, why does Gallifrey need so many sofas? And so I assume it's James Goss really plays up that idea.
Yeah.
The other line I thought was amusing was the fact that the game of cricket is invented by primary school teachers to teach about eternity. So if you love cricket, which actually I must admit I do, I love going and spending days at the Test match. Other people just can't believe how boring it is. But I thought as a summary, a way of teaching eternity was a clever thing. So, yep, I think the way it just builds on itself. Once again, it's amazing how complex these audiobooks are getting. It's not that long ago that an audiobook was simply someone sat down and read a book to you. But with this, there's music, there's sound effects, there's the whole soundscape is more complex.
Yeah.
So not only do you have a reader who is extraordinarily talented, as Dan Starkey is, and there were a few Sontaran voices you could hear coming through at times.
There was Thatcher too.
Talented...
Thatcher was in there too.
Yes, Thatcher was good.
He does a good Thatcher.
It was a good Thatcher. But just the whole soundscape is so rich. So I think audiobooks have just come on so far from what I used to listen to.
A couple of interesting facts about it. It has 42 chapters, which is a very important number in Douglas Adams' lore. And every chapter, what struck me about this book was that it does not let up. If you listen to it at normal speed, like I did for 9 hours, it does not. It is completely and utterly relentless. The humour, the style of Douglas Adams' humour just is non-stop the whole way through. And that's what I think, James Goss is not just trying to, take bits of Douglas Adams and throw them in here and there. He's really focusing on making this as true to Douglas Adams as he can, but even more so. Like I said, I don't think Douglas Adams would have written a book this long, but it was just constant. Every single line is like Douglas Adams gold. There's jokes in everything. And I really have a lot of respect for James Goss. This would have been a mammoth task to put this book together, to try and connect it. I don't know how he did it, whether he, took original scripts or whether he, compared it with Life, the Universe and Everything and took elements of that. I don't know exactly how he did it, but oh man, what a massive task.
Yes, my understanding is it was never scripted. It was just a detailed story outline. And I suspect the reason why it is such a huge book is James Goss got the whole story outline. Had Douglas Adams sat down to actually write the scripts, it would have been cut down, cut away, things that you can't do that won't work. But because James Goss had the whole outline, he was then able to expand on every scene, every idea, every race. And so that's what happens. We have so many different races introduced with their idiosyncrasies. We've got the Doctor and Romana living on a fish planet for months. It's only one chapter, but obviously they've been there for months. And there's a whole chapter on economy and how all these people were happy living how they were living fishing, and suddenly someone says, you need a bank. And then people start trading banks and buying property and land values, and you could just see society being attacked. Douglas Adams was very political in terms of his views on environment and on money. And so I think James Goss there's a couple of chapters there which are very much, one's all about the economy, another one's all about the environment, and about the environment being destroyed. And it's all done humorously, it's all done with a lot of fun, and you sort of can't believe it's happening, but then you look at what we've been doing with our planet, and you can say, well, actually, I can see where he's getting it from.
And James Goss, if you think about other tasks that he's been given by Big Finish and the BBC, look, he's in charge of Time Lord Victorious, so he's in charge of that whole arc. I don't know if he came up with the whole idea of Time Lord Victorious, but he's obviously able to grasp these massive canvases and fill in those. Well, he does the detail as well. And the Krikkitmen is a great example of a massive canvas, but so detailed all the way through. And I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed it. I know it's taken me a few years to get to it, but I'm glad we did it.
Yes, I had it downloaded and hadn't listened to it, but because you had this idea of 42 had to do Douglas Adams, it made me listen to something I had been putting off, but was so worth it. So thank you, Dwayne.
My pleasure. And the book looks so nice. I've been jumping on YouTube and looking at people doing some reviews of the book, and it's Yeah, really nice looking book as well. I might have to go and get a copy of that. Not an actual hard copy, not a Kindle one.
Yes, I must. Yes, I'm tempted to. I'm trying to resist, but we'll see.
Very good. All right, well, it's been great to talk about that. Let's talk briefly about our recommendations for this week. You go first, Philip.
Well, while we're talking about audiobooks, I'm going to recommend another one. So one of the latest ones to come out this year is The Hand of Fear. It's just been released. Once again, it's read by Pamela Salem, which wouldn't be the most obvious choice for The Hand of Fear. She would appear in a couple of episodes times in The Robots of Death. But can I just say, her voice is so rich and so sultry, I don't care. I could just sit, I did. I just lay back and let Pamela whisper into my ears, and I was happy as. So it's a great, it's a good quality turn of six novel, retelling the plot. There's a few things he does which are interesting, but once again, it's the progress of music, of soundscape, being well read. I highly recommend The Hand of Fear.
Okay, for me, I'm going to recommend the Fourth Doctor box set. So Series 10, Volume 1, that's just been released this month. They are splitting them into separate releases too. And I have been listening to the story The World Traders. I think that's a Guy Adams script. Absolutely fantastic story. Really loving it. As I said last year, I was a bit disappointed with the Tom Baker series, from January last year. But this time, there has been a definite switch, even though the stories are still four-parters. There's just something different about... there's more of a connection in these stories than there was in the last ones. And possibly it's because of the remote recording involved with Tom and Lala in last season. I don't know whether that chemistry that Tom and Louise have is a little bit harder to achieve with the remote recording when Tom and Lala are doing their series. I don't know, but I'm just absolutely blown away. So if you want a great story to listen to kick off this year, the World Traders, Fourth Doctor and Leela story, absolutely fantastic. So that's my recommendation for this week.
Sounds great.
Anything else you wanted to throw in there today, Philip?
No, it's good to discuss the answer to the life of the universe and everything.
Yeah, 42. Seems like such a long time ago. Oh, boy.
It does.
All right. So next time, we did promise a couple of shows ago that we're going to talk about the January monthly release, but for various reasons that had to be put off. So rather than delay episodes, we've been putting out extra ones in between. So next time, we will be talking about this month's monthly release, Colony of Fear, written by Roland Moore. We're going to have a chat with Roland about that too, and get some of his insights into writing. He's done quite a few scripts for Big Finish now, and a bit of TV as well, which we might even talk to Roland about. So that will be good. So until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Catch you later. You have been listening to the Sirens of Audio, episode 42, a tribute to Douglas Adams, with Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your favourite podcatcher, and then watch for the omens. Write to us at sirensofaudio@gmail.com, or by all the fires of night we'll have that skull off you. Check our webpage at sirensofaudio.com for the latest releases of the Mona Lisa. Our Twitter handle is @AudioSirens. Find one lump or two of us on Facebook by typing the Sirens of Audio into the search bar. And unless you enjoy being tortured by someone with cold hands, keep listening to as much audio drama as your splintered selves can handle, because when you listen to audio drama,